the topic for today's session is translation is stepping into the minds of authors. So actually this is for the speakers that we have been introduced to the audience, but let me introduce the audience also to you. When the city is known for its critical understanding of literature and the frankness of expression. So let us look forward to that. The translation, as we all will agree that it's a travel basically. But it's a travel through time because the original work is written at some other time and the translator is translating it at some other time. Also, it is a travel through cultures because we are stepping or we are reading about some other culture which is not yours. Also, it is a journey or a travel through beliefs. And also, obviously, it is a travel through minds. Now, minds is the perception, like the author's perception of things, situation, his own or her own unique experiences and interpretation. Also, there is a mind of translator who understands what is written by his views and his understanding with his mind. And there is a third mind of the reader who is absorbing the content in his or her own language, which was written in some other language by someone else at some other time. So this is a beautiful journey, and every travel is different for each traveler. So that is why I think we always look forward to the next translation. So you have all heard who has translated what and how the translations have been liked by the people. In today's session, we will be mostly focusing on literary translations, obviously not on the technical translation. And I'm sorry. So the topic is stepping in the mind. So there is one view that it is very necessary that the translator wears the author's hats, shoes, or whatever it is. So basically, she has to immerse in the content. Another view is that the translator should keep a safe distance from the work, be separate from the work. And the third view is that, well, it depends. It depends on the genre, it depends on the work, and it depends on how intense the book is. So my first question is to Sunanda about her. There will be references to the works that they have translated or written, but the discussion is not limited to those works. So Sunanda has translated a book from German into Marathi. The title is Akash Patal. The book is about the bipolar disorder and how the author overcame that or is struggling with that. So it was an interesting project, and my question is that there was a lot of interaction with the author also. So does that help in translation or does it hinder your understanding of the work? Because it is the book about the mind itself, and the author has already opened his mind in the book.
Yes.
So
yes, that is true. It was a very interesting project actually of Goethe Institute, and I was fortunate to be part of it. There was a digital platform, and that one particular book, which is called Die Welt im Rücken, it was being translated into 10 different Asian languages. And we translators, together with author, we were meeting almost every day on a digital platform. And we used to ask the author whatever difficulties we had in understanding, because there were many references to, for example, to different places in Berlin or in Germany, or there were references for some politicians, for example. And lot of references were there for music, all musicians in different times. And of course, he was talking about his illness, his mental disorder, bipolarity. And so it was really difficult sometimes to understand. And in this particular instance, I would say that yes, it did help that we had, the author was very cooperative, he was very prompt also in his answers, and sometimes he used to upload also visual clippings or audio clippings, so it was very helpful because sometimes you really don't know how to go further, but there the author was always there, and we also had interaction with each other. All the translators could also help each other that
that
way.
is one
But
more
it is not always the case, because sometimes, for example, if you translate Shakespeare or Goethe or so where the author is of course not available, then you have to depend on your own interpretation or other help,
Yes.
or ask native speaker if it is possible.
Yes, that's true. Still nowadays it is quite easy to imagine or even look at the things that you don't know. But as you said, the author actually creates something in the book. So Alexandra said that it is not just the mind, but the whole world that the author creates. And also complementary to that, Sila said that there are different worlds, and every world is important. So I would request both of them to speak about that in any sequence they like.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, in translation, and I am a translator as well as someone who runs an organization that deals with translation. Translation is at the core of what we do, and we deal with it in a number of ways. So I'm quite aware that there are different relationships present in translation. You have the relationship between the translator and the author. If the author is still alive, if the author is not alive, you may have a relationship with previous translations of his work. And you also, and this is what I would do if I'm translating someone who has been translated into other languages, I would also look at those translations. So you have that area where you actually dealing with translations of the same work into other languages, and it can be very helpful. It can be helpful when you have questions. Of course, if you have questions, you ask the author to start with, and some authors say that they get suspicious when they don't get any questions from the translator. But then some authors are very busy, so, because they're being translated into a large number of languages, so you may not be able to get their attention. And as for what you mentioned earlier, the world that you're stepping into, this is, to my mind, this is something that an author creates, and it's a world that is really, it is a creation of his or her mind. I should start with her mind, but it's also a world that depends on the language that the author writes in. It's a world that obviously is governed by the politics of the place that the writer writes about, and so on. So there's a number of factors that are at play when we are translating. And what I would also like to mention is that what we as an organization do, and it's something that I want to mention also because we have been doing this in India quite a lot, we create projects where we bring together poets who translate each other, and they do that through a bridge language. So what happens in these workshops that we have been organizing is that we work through or with a translation into a language that all the poets know, which would be typically English, and the poets then work on translations into their own language. It's a way of really having a dialogue, a kind of multi-directional dialogue, and it's about learning about poetry scenes, let's say, and poetry traditions of nations that you may not know much about. It's a way of getting new translations, but it's mainly a way of bringing writers, poets in this case together, and it has an impact on their future writing and on their reading as well.
So true. And about the words that are different, basically that is why we have the translations in the first place, because all words are different and important.
Well, definitely, and actually it's a very hard task, I think, because even now we're in this room and we're perceiving this room in so many levels. Like I look at this cheerful decoration, and it reminds me of the weddings that I attended in my local town as a kid. So that gives me a lot of emotions already. While Alexandra is talking, I'm not that person before she started to talk. I'm a different person. So even us reading one sentence, and I'm not talking about the books that you read when you're a teenager or after your 40s. You read them and you perceive them differently, and you're only one person, and you perceive them differently even the other day, because just like Heraclitus says, you're not the same person. You never get your hair the same way. You never, even the chicken you eat tastes different. So to me, it's an impossible task to find some common references, cultural references, emotional references that will somehow bring us to a point where we will all enjoy the book in ourselves. So that's why we have science, we have sciences that name things, name feelings, we have the science of translation, so that we have some common ground to start with. But then, I think on top of them, it's just millions of universes, and I think this is what makes this crazy planet an exciting place.
Absolutely. So actually, that the translation is a starting point to stepping into the another world.
Yes, yes.
And when we step into these worlds and different references, actually the target language gets richer and richer, and our own words get richer and richer, and you grow as a person as well. So, but I wanted to ask you that different cultures, and it is really difficult when absolutely unknown culture comes to you with only the help of language. It's very difficult, and so my question to all is that, do different cultures make different minds, or do different minds make different cultures? So what is more, we don't have to answer it right now, but that is we can think about why the cultures are different and why the minds are different. What makes the other? What is the starting point?
I think we need a philosopher in this room, but to answer that.
Okay, yeah.
So I'll just briefly add my personal experience here. I grew up in Chandigarh, which is what we call Punjabi culture. I lived in Delhi for my higher education formative years. And then I started to learn German and lived in Germany for a bit. So for me, it was a cultural adventure, but at the same time, all that I imbibed has impressions on my mind. So the way I think today and the way I am as a person today is the cultural confluence that I kind of amalgamated by various exposures. And when I started to learn German, I was still in India. And I was trying to read a lot of translations first to kind of acquaint myself with the culture. So I think the best thing that a translation does is it opens a window into a completely foreign world and gives you impressions in the mind which helps you become a newer person.
Absolutely. I think more accepting, more receptive person, yes, different things do exist, and they will be there, like that kind of acceptance. So, what do you think? Do geographies also play a role in this?
Yes, I think so. Because it is also very much connected with the culture, with the
Yes.
forming of culture. Because the way you dress, the way you eat and drink, it is all connected with the geography of that particular land and the culture of that land. And for example, I experienced this when I was translating a German text, and it was a Swiss text, and that person goes into a dining for lunch, and he is offered so many things, and it was so difficult to translate the exact appropriate words into Marathi, because we don't have that kind of culture at all. And even the way it was described how he was dressed. And or in some other text there was a reference to a grandfather of that protagonist, who is describing he is a German person. He has gone to Russia and he's building the oven, the fireplaces, and he is describing in his letters all the details. And there are only 4, 5, 6 sentences about that, and the grandmother is getting bored because reading all these descriptions, and so she is, even those 2 or 3 sentences, they were so difficult, because having fireplace is something very new and is something beyond our understanding. Yes. And the way it was described, it was just difficult. Absolutely. But I did translate it, and I left it to the readers.
Yes.
Yes,
Please go ahead.
So, can I comment on this? Yeah, I think we do. When it comes to translation and culture and geography, I always say that one of the problems of translation are the 3 F's, and that would be food, fauna, and flora, because food is something that's very cultural. You often won't have a name for something that's central to a particular culture, a dish, and actually animals, they can be very different. You may not have a word for a particular animal or a particular plant in your language. And what it is, it's not that there isn't a word. There may be a word that's very scholarly, but it doesn't conjure up the connotations and so on that you have when you're reading about it in your language. And so sometimes you say that you actually use the most neutral word. So if you say bus, for example, which is not fauna or flora and so on, but everybody can imagine the bus that they have in their city, So it really depends on what you want the reader to do.
But at the same time, like a pub, going to a pub, what does a Britisher understands with that, and what a Punekar understands with that can be entirely different. So maybe you were saying something.
Of course, with the fauna, I didn't know the three F terms, but the Dutch have over than Oh, is it now? It has become a theory, and we accept it. It's accepted. It's congratulations. And the Dutch has more than 20 words for rain, because it rains like more than 250 days. And then we were talking in the Dutch course. The teacher asked, so what do your countries, what do you have a lot of words? I was thinking. I said, family relatives, because in I think it's the same in English, uncle, and so the Dutch use oom, and they really have either uncles or aunts. But in Turkish we define every other person with every. So I'm really curious. How would you translate it?
Absolutely. I mean, that is another view how you look at things and how you are made in culture. I think it happens in Asian languages more, that we have very specific names for all relations, very specific names. And when it comes to dogs or horses, we just in India there was a dog, but but in Europe they would say I have a Saint Bernard or I have a German Shepherd or what. So we don't mind. I mean, there was a dog. There was a black dog. Height of specific. So I think how you look at it also differs from that. That may be another influence of culture or how we are made also.
Actually, familial relationships could become the fourth F. Because I know in India you have name for every different, if it's your father's sister, your mother's sister, and so on.
Yeah. In
it's
many
different.
things, in many books, like I have seen that the translators say, they live with the word first occurs a cousin. So the translator assumes that the cousin may be Chachera Mamera. She assumes something and then she starts. And after 173 pages, she discovers that, oh no, it was not Mamera, it was Chachera. She has to go back, change wherever possible, and then go back to again page number 173.
And I think, of course, and there is a technical problem there, because we would know by naming our each and every relative differently if they are boys or girls, men or women. So the translator most of the time doesn't know, and then it's she or he comes back to you and like, oh, so this person, is he a man or a woman? Because it's impossible to know from. If I don't use a name, even if I use a name, from that adjective we attach to that person, it's you wouldn't know.
In India, we are more used to have translations from English into Indian languages. But here is Alexandra who says that even English language translates from some other languages. So Alexandra, which languages are translated into English in US, UK?
Well, yes, English-speaking countries are known for not translating very much because there's this notion that they have enough good writing, and if they want diversity, if they want something exotic, they can go to Indian writing in English, for example. So this is one thing, but obviously there are translations that happen, and translation has become something that is discussed more and more in English-speaking countries, in the UK, in the US, and elsewhere. And the number of translations is growing. Actually, as an organization, we also produce statistics on translation into English in the UK and Ireland, and we do it not every year, but every, second, third year. And so we have the numbers, and the interesting thing is why we do it, because nobody else does. In other countries, it's the National Library that does this job. So the statistics are there, and we have done analysis of the source language. So it would be, there are no surprises really. The most translated languages would be French, German, Spanish, Italian, and so on, Russian also. There are some interesting factors. For example, Japanese is quite high, and it's because of the manga comics. So it kind of changes the numbers. There are non-European languages that are now growing. Arabic is one, for example, and you would have, there's more and more interest now in translations from Asian languages, for example, Japanese, Korean, and so on.
Yeah, so
but I would like to say that also there is this figure which is 3%, and that's supposed to represent the percentage of or the share of translations into English, which is very low compared to any other country in Europe. And what we did, actually, we discovered that it's not as bad when it comes to fiction. And actually, the percentage for fiction is about 5% these days. But what has grown is the absolute number of translations. And the percentage remains more or less the same because there are more and more books published. So in a way, as a percentage, it's maybe not such a good way of, looking at it. Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe there is a more and more curiosity of what is going on in Asian minds or Arabic minds. So, Prashasti, what do you think? What might be the another reason for that?
So I think there's a whole wave towards a political economic wave towards Asia, and we are a very high context culture, all of us, and the curiosity is coming from very low context cultures. So there is a generic need of stepping into the minds of Asians, because you design the products, you design your services around a consumer market which is growing, which is booming. And our cultures may be huddled together under the Asian continent, but like in India, every 100 kilometers, the concept, the language, the context, and everything changes. So translation at two levels is very important, the syntactic and the semantic. And the semantic translation is which is the more difficult part, because you need to think about appropriation in a particular place, the register. You also need to think about what the emotions of the readers are going to be. So, like in Marathi and Malayalam, there will be a completely different context, and they're next to each other. So similarly for the Western world, to understand what is going on, just writing of a person from Korean origin, lived in the US, written in English is not enough. You need to get into the minds of Koreans by picking up language, writing from there, and then contextualizing it.
So as you said earlier, it's just learning the language or reading in that language is never enough. Maybe it's a start, but unless it is backed by more learning in the minds of the.
Actually, this is the golden era for translations.
Thank you.
Because, yes, I mean, we see a reverse wave in India as well. How reading in Indian languages is becoming more and more significant. And it's also largely driven by the consumption in, not in the print format, but also in the screen format. If you look at the large media houses, the amount of commissioning that is happening for Indian languages, it's quite interesting, and that's why it's a great time to be a translator, because a book published in X language finds an audience worldwide, and then it moves to the screen, and it finds another audience who might not have read a word in their life because they can't stick to a book and they need moving images there. Plus, the machine translation is also adding to it. Companies like Google are investing heavily into translations, and they're also jumping into the domain of knowledge. So they're trying to pick up knowledge and translate it through artificial intelligence to make other things smarter around the industry. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of innovation that is actually the breakthrough from context to innovation. The root is translation, and yes, that's where the human translation is important, because to translate feelings, I fear machines will do it, but we still haven't gotten to that demonic dystopian era, and we still like to say I love you in person instead of sending a robo or a drone to deliver the message.
Well, with machine translation, and I was curious to see what you were going to say on this, but I think it also, machine translation really suggests that there is only one correct translation, doesn't it? Because it's a technical approach, you have machine translation, it can only come up with one
correct
translation of
yeah,
a text,
it's quite dumb as
which is exactly what doesn't happen with creative translation of creative writing, of fiction, poetry, and so on. No two translations are the same. And we were talking earlier when we were chatting before there's this session, and I said that in Britain, translation has become very popular as a topic to discuss at festivals. And another activity that has become very popular is translation duels. So you have two translators who are translating the same text in real time in front of the audience. So and this has become really very, very popular. And and I think it should be something that should be done here as well, because it really shows audiences who may not have access to translation what it is about, what happens when a translator is working on a translation of a text, which is fiction, poetry, or creative non-fiction, and what choices they make, why, and so on. So it's fascinating. It's really interesting.
So-
Machines can't do that.
Alexandra has given us two things in today's session. One is the F theory,
And we made it four. Four after.
4F theory, and this is, we should surely suggest it to the organizers of PILF as well. We can have another session of this maybe
It's like
next
a poetry slam, isn't it? They call it the poetry slam, so it's like the translation.
Actually, they also call it translation slam sometimes. Yeah, yeah.
Be lovely to.
So we work with, as the German Book Office in New Delhi, we work with the most neglected people in the whole life cycle, which is the translators. Because translation is seen as a very solitary exercise. You pick up a book, you read it, you love it, and then you start to translate it. And you start to translate it in a mother tongue or the language of comfort, and you're translating it from a language that you're exposed to and skilled from. And if the author is not available, there's a sense of detachment that a translator has to actually exercise, because you cannot recreate a story. You can't co-create a story. There's a very tight framework that you have to work in, but at the same time, you can't let your emotions disappear, because a gory story, a dark story will instill some sort of emotion in you, and that needs to be correctly represented into the end translation. Otherwise, it will read differently from what you have studied. And therefore, we at the German Book Office realized that it's very important for these people to come together, talk, and work on the semantic side of things. Because syntactics you can improve by
Absolutely.
refining your language, reading more, reading diversity, but semantics of it requires a lot of cultural knowledge, lot of interaction, lot of debate and ideation, and experiencing the places. So in our workshops, we kind of talk about more semantics, emotions, feelings, travel, food, ideas, current political situations. We also invite translators to Germany to spend some time there. If the author is living, then spend some time with the author also, like The King of China, and the book needed that interaction because it was a very, very vague subject. I think that's why translators really need more of hand-holding, and that is what we are missing in Indian languages.
Yes.
All the European languages have these translation programs. We have organizations like you who are doing beautiful job of bringing across people together. But the appeal in India, despite of this beautiful language diversity and a very, very rich tradition that we don't have translation support. We don't have a mechanism to work from one language into other if the via translation hasn't happened in English, or we don't have a translation body that will say, we will give you economic support, we will give you knowledge support, why don't we further it together? I think that is something which is missing, which we really need to find a way.
Absolutely. I would like to contribute 2 points here. One is that there is a lot of efforts now. We can see that those are happening of translations among Indian languages. Like a Bangla book, you can see now in Marathi. I mean, in Marathi we have already, right from Sharat Chandra also. But from Malayalam to Marathi or from Marathi to Punjabi, these things are happening. But as you rightly said, there is not a great translation culture, though we have so many cultures, but we are yet to go into that translation culture where you have all the environment, and there is some value to translators. That is anyways, so let us not go into that economics, and let me not open my mind out on this subject. But that the author also writes on two levels. One is the content, the thought or the story that is telling, and the other is how she tells the story. She makes many choices, like whether she is writing a poem or a novel, or the form of the writing, or the form within the form. Like if she is writing a novel, then whether it is like there are many people telling the same story, or there is a chronological story, or there are smaller pieces of tellings. So the form within form. Also, there is a length of the work. So all these choices are already made by the author. So when we are stepping into the mind of the author, what do you think, all of you, and all of them are writers and translators. So at one, when they are writing their original work, they have all the liberty in the world. And so I think, and when they are translating, there are obviously they have to go, do they have to go by the choices of the author? Or can they take some liberty? I mean, a novel can be translated into novel, but like if it is a 16-line poem, can it be a 22 lines poem?
Yes.
Yes, that's a straight answer. Yes, but for all other choices, do they have to stick with the author's choices?
Well, very briefly, I think it very much depends on the target language and what and the conventions of. For instance, if you're translating poetry, if it rhymes, you're translating into a completely different poetic culture, which may rhyme in a different way, which where you may have to break the lines in a different way, so you end up with a longer poem or a shorter one. It really it depends. There's a lot of factors at play. Yeah.
I think translating poems is very difficult, and understand it. I mean, the readers should also understand the same way what translator intended or the author intended. Of course, there is a difference because everybody interprets on his or her own way. Poems, it depends on the target language, and it also depends with the literary tradition or literary history of that particular target
the sensibilities
language.
of the
Yes, because in India, for example, we have another tradition of it. It can be called translation, but we have this bhashya. It is not bhashantar, it is bhashya. So it is translation with commentary. And we have so many different poets who have done this in almost every language of India. So this kind of translation culture or history we have. So when you translate, for example, I have been working as editor of a Marathi Translation Quarterly for last 20 years, and we are focusing on the literary text being translated from different foreign languages into Marathi. And there, the most difficult part is, of course, translating poems. And the question is always raised whether how much loyal you can be to the author and how much liberty the translator should take while translating. And especially in poems, translation of poems, this occurs very frequently, I suppose.
So regarding poetry, I've heard two different viewpoints. First is by Peter Urban, who was translating Anton Chekhov and various other famous literary canons into German. He says simply poetry cannot be translated. It can only be felt and emoted. And then Rakshanda Jalil, who translates Gulzar Sahab from Urdu to English, she said translation is non-existent. It is transcreation. Because I read the poetry, I feel it, I absorb it, and then I just say it. So that's why poetry is a subject that cannot really be interpreted into the world of translation, and that's where the skill and the emotion of the translator also is reflected. But I think it stands true for every kind of text, for every kind of translation, because if a literary text has a character development or a character description, then how the character portrayal happens is also poetry.
Yes. So that is what I meant by choices made. Like there are a page-long description of a lady's dress, which is very necessary for that from the author's point of view, and in the target language, it may not the readers may not feel it so necessary in that. So I mean these are the choices, but I think the expression is also what is important in the complete understanding or complete appreciation of the work. So again, let me throw a last question to all the panelists, and then you can ask the questions to them. One is that, does it help, like, do you think that you should, or the translator should understand, or at least should feel the question that why in the first place the author has written this work? What made him, what was the urge to express? What was the urge to tell this story to the world? If that is understood. And the second question to oneself, that why do I want to translate this? So does that steps into anyone's mind?
I'll give a very brief answer to this. Translators don't always choose what they translate, and there are really two ways in which
But they can not reject.
Well, they can reject. They can reject something. They can, sometimes translators tell a publisher, "Look, this is a really fascinating book. I'd love to translate it. Look at it. Would you like to publish it?" But that happens really quite rarely and less. And so the situation we have with translators who translate from the more like major languages, more widely spoken languages, let's say French into English, they are just asked by a publisher to translate a book, and they often confess to not reading it before they start translating.
I think the criteria is that how many copies were sold in it.
I once translated a book which I thought it would be an interesting book because I hadn't read it before I accepted the contract. And then I ended up with a book which really needed complete rewriting in the target language. And I didn't put my name on the translation because it would ruin my reputation. And it's a book that has been selling and selling and selling. It's a very bad book.
But oftentimes even in India, we feel that why this book is translated at all. I mean, there are good writers writing in the target language themselves better than this. So maybe there are some hard choices.
Yeah.